What's Louie, my killer? Today we're going to be covering 3 exercises that is going to double your bench. Well, potentially. So these 3 exercises that I've compiled are going to be really good if you're finding yourself in a plateau or a wall and you're trying to kind of overcome it and blast through it. These are going to be excellent things to add to your regimen and kind of add to your bench press variations to be able to get through that block or hurdle that you may be facing. So to start with, we're going to start with the pin press. So a pin press is when you set up the pins or the safeties, whatever it may be, at the bottom of where your chest would be at the bottom of your bench to catch the bar before it actually gets to your chest. So you want it to be as close as possible to where your chest is going to be, or rather in some cases where you want it to be at. Pin that last part, we're going to circle back to that. And this is going to be great for bar placement on your chest, because sometimes we have clients who have an issue placing too far down or too high. So this really gives you the ability to work on where exactly you're putting the bar to make sure that you're putting it in the right places, right? The second thing this is going to be really good for is working on isolating that movement where you get stuck. If you find yourself getting stuck just at your chest and you're not able to engage your lats enough or keep them tight, you can really work on that, bringing it down and making sure that you're working on pressing out of that sticking point. I think that in my personal anecdotal experience, having someone work through a sticking point like that helps them to overcome it when they get to their bench, because sometimes it's more of a mental aspect to it than it is a physical aspect, and just being able to work that sticking point in isolation can be very helpful. The third thing we're going to notice that pin presses are really good for is if you're trying to work on increasing your arch. As I was previously mentioning, if you take the pins or the safeties and move it up a bit, you can kind of work on increasing your arch and trying to meet the safeties / pins where they are to increase your arch or work on that. I've seen people do that, use pin presses for that reason as well. I really like the pin press, and that's going to be the first exercise I recommend. I wanted to choose a couple, one that was a little, I'm not going to say unconventional, but less common that you may not see, right? The second bench variation or the second exercise I'm going to mention now is going to be the tempo bench. So this is a great exercise for building strength in the bench press. A tempo bench is a bench that has a count on it, or a time, if you will. It's usually broken up into 3 parts. For my purposes, I'm going to be discussing how I break it up. So people differently, don't come for me. This is how I do it. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way, but this is how I do it, so I'm explaining that. I have to put that disclaimer. Breaking up into 3 parts, right? The first part for me is going to be the descent, right? The second part for the bench specifically is going to be at the chest when you get to the chest. And the third part is going to be coming back up. If we have a 3-2-0 for me, that means you're taking 3 seconds to descend to your chest. You're pausing 2 seconds at your chest, and you're trying to press the bar as fast as possible after that 2-second pause. So why is this good? How is this going to increase your bench, right? So by slowing down the movement, you're able to work through your ability to keep your lats tight and keep them engaged. When I'm talking about your lats, I mean in your back. You're just keeping your back in general tight and considering your body like a spring, right? Because that's really what you're trying to do here. You're trying to compress that spring until you get it super tight, and then you're trying to release that energy, right? That's my analogy for basically the squat and the bench, that you're really trying to coil and compress that spring so that you can use that energy to erupt off. In addition to that, you can use the tempo bench to kind of clean up your bar path. So if you have kind of like a wonky bench, like you kind of going back and forth on the way down, or you just have like too much movement in your bench coming down, you can really use the tempo bench to be able to clean up your movement, be able to kind of like work out any kinks you have in your bar path and try to get it as straight and controlled down as possible. My third recommendation is going to be the incline dumbbell press, preferably in a neutral grip. The reason I chose this, and I chose this because I like it more for the upper chest development. I think that's good. You can also do flat dumbbell press, but I personally am going to say incline dumbbell press here. I think it's good for getting individual, like isolated arm work, balancing out the strength in each arm, right? For these, I prefer more of a neutral grip, which means I just watch your arms like this. The reason I prefer this is because that having a more neutral grip and having those shoulders flared out less kind of leads to less injuries that I've experienced personally. I know this may not usually true for everybody, but just like having those elbows tucked in, if something goes awry or wrong, you know what I'm saying, they can just kind of like drop it to their chest and kind of not have to worry about if it's out here something like it going too far back or up or some nonsense happening that may potentially injure them. But I really like these for just that isolation work, being able to get each arm working, being able to translate that back to the bench. If you can get pretty heavy on the incline dumbbell press, for instance, if you're starting with 30s and you get up to 60s or 70s, you definitely probably at that point should have your bench double, like no doubt. If you're there's no way in heck that if you were doing 30s beforehand and then you end up doing 70s, that your bench is at least close to double. So I really like those as well. I think that using a combination of these three is going to be really good for your bench. Rep schemes. Let's talk about that because I just realized I did not cover rep schemes. So thank you if you made it this far. I will now cover rep schemes. So with the pin press, for the pin press, I would probably recommend you can program these. However, once again, these are my recommendations, right? If you are just worried about using it for chest placement and whatnot, I probably program like a 3x3 or like a 4x3 for pin press, just because you're going to be more worried about how and where you're placing it and not really trying to get high volume off of it. For tempo, I may go a little bit higher volume, probably like 4 to 5 reps. Me personally, I would say a 3x5. I think that would be good because with the tempo, you're really just trying to slow down the movement and get perfection out of there. Those are less intensive and ease up on the weight for that as well, because you want to make sure that the weight you're choosing is meeting your purpose with what you're doing, if that makes sense, right? And then for the incline dumbbell press, I probably do a 3x10. If you get into more like a strength block or peaking block, drop it to maybe a 3x8 so you can push a little harder. I think that would be good for that, getting some more volume and some more reps in there and really making sure that you're keeping your lats tight on that. And bonus points if you tempo it down and do a 3-second down descent from the top. That'll really help with engagement and overall like controlling your strength, and that could potentially help you as well. So those are my recommendations to help you double your bench. And if you have any questions or you want to have a discussion, let me know in the comments. What do you do? What works for you? What doesn't? I guess what does not work for you? What else do you guys want me to cover? Let me know and I'll put my thoughts into the universe, man. We are so back.